I am very excited today to introduce to you Audrey Schoen. She's not only a licensed marriage and family therapist in business for herself, but also a business coach for fellow therapists. And a lot of us need a business coach. Thank you for doing that. She is dedicated to helping adults and couples create calm and congruent lives. Her article called Five Keys to Happy Lasting Marriage was just recently published in Authority magazine online. Welcome, Audrey. Glad to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. You mentioned in the article that during your appointment with your first client, a wave of calm washed over me. I knew in my bones that I had found my calling.
Yeah,
You want to tell us a little bit more about that sense of calling to your work?
yeah, sure. I had actually thought about being a therapist when I was in my undergrad work. And I remember mentioning to my mom, and she doesn't remember this exactly, but I said, I think I might want to be a therapist. And she's like, oh, why would you want to listen to people's problems all day? So I studied art for 2 years.
Uh-huh.
And I just found that I loved psych classes. And so I found my way back to therapy. And I think I knew then that this was what I was supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was in that moment, like I was so nervous. I was so nervous going into that session, and my voice was shaking as I was doing the informed consent. And I just felt so calm once the client started sharing what was going on. I have grappled on and off with this profession over the years, but every time that I struggle with it, something pops up and reminds me that, like, no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I just keep coming back to it over and over. Even when I struggle with it, it feels so right.
I was going to ask you if during the hard days
Yeah.
that memory comes back to kind of sustain you, and I think that's what you just answered.
Yeah, not only the memory, but something will happen where a client will have a big aha moment, and I'll be like,
Mm,
that's it. That's why I keep doing this.
that keeps you going. I know those moments. They keep me going as well.
Exactly.
What is different for you with couples therapy versus individual therapy?
You can't hide in couples,
Nope, you can't.
right? In individual therapy, it's your perspective on everything, and we can do great work with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in couples, you have your spouse or your partner sitting right there calling BS on you.
Your reality check.
It's a reality check, and no matter what somebody says, I'm like, there's truth. There is a grain of truth in everything that our partner says about us, and that might
Mm-hmm.
be a hard pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to find that grain of truth because that's going to help us grow.
That's the pain point of growth, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
We all have them, don't we?
Yeah.
Many couples think they should be able to figure their marriage out on their own.
Mhm.
At one time, my late husband and I had that belief. We hung on to it through about 5 miserable years until we gave up and admitted we needed help. But why can't we figure it out on our own?
Yeah. Oh, great question. We are too stuck in our own maladaptive patterns to see
Mm-hmm.
a way out on our own. And our partner is too good at activating those
Oh,
maladaptive
yes.
patterns in us and vice versa, right? So
Yes.
we end up kind of inside the bubble, and we need to be able to get outside the bubble. And often that takes help from the
Mm-hmm.
outside to be like, come out here and see this with me from the outside.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good answer to that question. We seem to marry our unfinished business, and I think that's part what you touched on just now, but what does that mean?
It means that we are going to find a partner who is just similar enough to the people who raised us in the ways that hurt us, and
Mm-hmm.
just different enough from them that there's hope that it can get better.
Mm-hmm.
And whether we like it or not, our nervous system is looking for familiarity with hope for change.
Yes.
And so we keep finding ourselves in that. And we're going to keep finding that until we resolve it.
And that's the unfortunate part and the fortunate part that even when individuals leave a troubled marriage, they quite often get back into a relationship that has the same issues. A friend of mine left his wife, had an affair with a coworker. They both divorced, married each other. And he admitted to my sister 10 years later that they were grappling with the same issues they'd had in their first marriage.
Exactly.
And,
Yes.
left this trail of devastation behind them because they didn't do the work that came up in the first marriage.
Right. A marriage can be a people growing machine if we
Yes.
allow it.
Well, whether we allow it or not, it certainly is triggering those areas where we need growth, right?
Well,
Long-term romance requires that you be proactive about doing what makes your partner feel loved in order to keep the romance alive. Why do couples need to be reminded of this? It seems kind of obvious.
it does seem obvious, and also life gets busy, right? I'm a parent of 6-year-old twins. I run 2 businesses. I have to take care of myself. And sometimes all of that can pile up so much that we end up taking our partner for granted without meaning to.
Yeah.
It does require intentional work to pop out of our own, self-awareness enough to say, oh, let me be aware of my partner in a way that isn't just me complaining about the things that they're not doing, but
Right.
appreciating the things that they are doing, or, be intentional about doing things that I know they appreciate too.
One of the myths that I'm sure you run across as well as I is that marriage ought to be easier.
Yeah, no.
No, it's not. Okay, you said in your written article, a common issue for many couples is lack of sex.
Mhm.
Men have learned that sex is an easy way to create emotional connection, but women want emotional connection prior to sex.
Mhm.
If conflict over this or any other issue takes the place of connection, sex disappears. Then
Yeah.
what happens?
Yeah, so the less connection we have, the less sex we have, the less sex we have, the less connection we feel, and it gets worse and worse and worse over time. Uh, I think something that I read recently that I think of here is don't be a one note song. And for whatever reason, culturally speaking, and this is not to blame men, but it's been my experience in couples work that men tend to turn into a one note song. I want sex. I'd like sex. Can we have sex? Right?
Mhm.
They're really looking for connection, but that's
Right.
how they learn to get it. And often, and I understand this is gender stereotypical, and so we'll take that in mind,
Okay.
that often the wife is saying, but I want other kinds of connection too.
Yes.
Right? And then we get more and more divisive about it, and we get less and less connection, which leads to less and less sex. And so there's a little bit of coming to the center on both sides of how can we meet for connection? How can I, as the husband, look for connection in other ways? And how, as I, as a wife, can be receptive to all types of connection?
Yes. Connection is what we crave, long for, and learning to be intentional about creating it seems to be one of the core lessons of
Yeah,
every successful marriage.
right.
You stress the importance of stepping outside of yourself and your agenda and really listening. Why
Mm.
is that so hard?
Oh man, this is where that internal activation comes into play, right? We marry our unfinished business. That unfinished business gets activated in our nervous system. We get a whoosh of overwhelm. Our nervous system goes on fire, right? And we get so focused on what is happening inside of us that
Mhm.
we aren't actually able to hear and listen to what our partner is saying and find the kernels of truth in it.
Mhm.
When we're able to self-regulate enough to hear what our partner is actually saying, we might actually get something useful.
Uh-huh.
We'll be able to respond to that in a useful way rather than a reactive way. And so the first step on either partner side is really managing their own reactivity and learning to self-regulate in those hard moments.
Do you teach your clients particular listening skills to help them? How do
Yeah,
how do you describe that?
Yeah, so we work on the two prongs of it. It's hard to listen if you're dysregulated.
Yes.
So we start with self-regulation. And then what I teach my clients to do is to listen with an ear for the kernels of truth. Like be curious, be
Mm-hmm.
compassionate,
Mm-hmm.
try to find the truth. Don't criticize what's not true, but look for what is true. And then
Uh-huh.
assume that that's true for your partner. So if your partner's saying, you don't listen to me, you could say, oh, that's interesting. It's true that my partner thinks that I don't listen. I wonder why that might be true for them. I get curious about that rather than
Yeah.
defend. Yeah.
Okay. And the next quote I picked out was you mentioned be curious, be aware of the assumptions you are making, the stories you are telling yourself about your partner.
Yep.
And if it quite often is a negative story that we start looping,
Yep.
through our brains. So describe how you address that with your couples.
Yeah. So in teaching that sort of acknowledgement of self-regulation, what I often ask them to do is to be aware of when they feel the whoosh of activation in their body. I ask them to take a deep breath and then get curious. Like really try to understand, put your own self aside and
Switch
really,
gears.
yeah, switch gears and really try to understand it from their partner's perspective. And ask questions about, oh, how did that feel? What was that like? Can you tell me more?
Mhm.
I want to understand this better. And be genuine about that. That is curiosity, because you'll probably learn something about your partner actually.
So you're teaching them to be curious, to switch gears from the activation to curiosity.
Right? And this requires that we trust that there will be time for our side to be heard later.
Yes.
If we're married, there's time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you're working together on this, you're going to make sure that you both get time for your side to be important.
I sometimes say to my clients, those lessons we learned in kindergarten about taking turns,
Yes.
taking turns in a discussion in marriage, especially when it's a hot topic, is so critical.
Yep.
And being aware, being able to calm down the child in us that wants to be heard first, hear me first, then I'll hear you.
Exactly.
How you talk about allowing for do-overs.
Yeah. Yeah. Our our internal stuff is going to take over and hijack us sometimes, right? We're going to get it wrong. We're going to say the wrong thing. We're going to use the wrong words. We might even be trying to do it right and still get it wrong, right?
Uh-huh.
And when we notice that that happens, we can say, hang on, let me try that again. And that in our partner, even if they say something that maybe comes at us the wrong way, we can say, hang on, that didn't feel good. Can we try again? Because I'm pretty sure you're trying to say something important right now, right? So giving
Yes.
both partners the ability to ask for a do-over at any time.
And sometimes that means believing the best intentions of your partner.
Yes, it does.
Your first tip in your article, and I'm going to suggest the people who watch this also go back and read the entire article because there were a lot of good tips in it. But your first tip was put it on the table. What does that mean?
So a lot of times conflict bleeds out all over every other aspect of life.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I teach my couples is to agree to put something in a box on the table. That doesn't mean we're sweeping it under the rug. It doesn't mean we're putting it in a closet never to be seen again until there's another fight. We're saying, you know what, this is a conflict we can't resolve right now. But we can set it aside and enjoy dinner together or enjoy going to the park with our kids together and not let that bleed out everywhere and ruin everything for everyone. So we're going to trust that we're going to come back to this
Mhm.
and not let it ruin everything else.
That's such an adult ability to postpone the difficult conversation and enjoy the moment
Yep.
rather than letting it bleed out. When my late husband and I were working on our hot issue, we called it putting it in the closet. Let's put it in the closet and we'd make a date, maybe tomorrow morning at 10, let's pull it out of the closet and talk about it some more. But it really required me to up level to a more adult,
Yes.
emotional state, I'm capable of waiting a few minutes or a few hours.
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
not a 2-year-old that has to have everything right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Audrey, I really loved your article. I loved everything. There were so many great tips in it. I admire the work you must be doing with couples. If there's a listener here that wants to reach out to Audrey, you can find her at Audrey, the website, AudreyLMFT.com, AudreyLMFT.com. Thank you so much for meeting me here. It's a privilege to have this brief connection with you. I wish you and your business the very best.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Wonderful. Maybe we'll meet again. I hope so.
You too.
Bye-bye.